Just wanted to kick off this Winning Strategies for Effective Grant Proposals webinar. It's part of our peer-to-peer webinar series that we've been doing for several months now. Today, our panelists are going to share actionable insights, expert tips, and proven strategies for writing compelling, fundable grant proposals that get results. And I'm happy to introduce Nancy Daniels. She's the Community Vitality Specialist with K-State Research and Extension. Over the past 7 years, she's taught grant writing to more than 3,500 Kansans, with participants later reporting that they've received more than $117 million in successful grant awards. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nancy and let the other panelists introduce themselves. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jason. Thanks for the opportunity to do this again. Go ahead and introduce yourselves, folks.
My name is Bret Glendening. I'm the city manager for the city of Osawatomie. I'm in my second term or tour of duty, I would say, as city manager here. I was first here from 2006 to 2011, and then just recently came back in October of 2021. And then beginning in 2022, we started a big push to start chasing grants, and we were very successful, which you'll see later on in the slide presentation. And I'm happy to be a part of this panel.
Hello, I'm Rebekah McCurdy. I work with the City of Ottawa. I'm the Assistant Finance Director and the City Treasurer. I spent 10 years in higher education at Ottawa University before moving into this role with the City of Ottawa in February of 21. I actually don't do our grant writing, but I do a lot of the grant reporting. I will give credit due to who does that on our team later. But I'm also excited to just be here.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Shawn Wesner. I'm the Executive Director for the Kansas Infrastructure Hub, and I'm so glad that you all are joining us, and we look forward to a really thoughtful and interesting discussion.
And Nancy, just real quick before you move on, I just wanted to mention to the folks on the call that please feel free to post any comments or questions in the chat, and we'll get to them later in the presentation. And I am going to be posting a link to the slides online.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. One of the things I love most about grants is that grants are an opportunity to change the conversation about your community. People follow the direction of their conversations, and grant writing is a way to move the conversation from what's wrong to what's possible.
So from Osawatomie's standpoint, I mentioned in the introduction that we made a concerted effort to start chasing some grants in 2022, and you'll see through the next couple of slides the functions of municipal government that we pursued grants in, and you can see by the statistics there we were quite successful in the last couple of years, leveraging every tax dollar that we levied to bring in an additional over $3 in funds to help pay for a number of different projects from public works and other city facilities to probably our biggest project that's been ongoing since 2021, which is an effort to improve the water infrastructure within our community. We waited for almost 2 years for a letter of conditions from USDA Rural Development. Our grant administrator on that project, Governmental Assistance Services out of Lawrence, was instrumental in helping us secure those funds, and they will be with us throughout the duration of the project with grant monitoring, certified payrolls, and all of those things that you're required to do when you're expending federal dollars. And then some of the other grants that we've achieved is what we've received, as well as some efforts, some areas in the library and arts, and then also some economic development grants. And I would note that these slides are probably almost a year old now. So there's been some additional grants that we've received, and we continue to pursue additional grants as well. There'll be more forthcoming for the residents of Osawatomie for sure.
Thanks, Bret. And I kind of mirrored his data for Ottawa's story. And we too have had a really change in focus. So when I started in 21, right after me, or actually a week before me, the city clerk started. Her name is Melissa Sherman, and she is our main grant writer, and she is phenomenal. And so we've really focused on looking for all sorts of revenue sources before we decide to fund a project with debt or even cash. And so big focuses for the city of Ottawa have been economic development, specifically housing is a huge thing in our community that we need. And then we've also really emphasized looking at even a small grants for small purchases. We do a lot of partnership with Walmart, with our fire and police. And then also some other big ones for us have been utilities because we have 3 public utilities. So those are big grant options for us. Big announcements we've had in the last 6 months that aren't on this list because we too have continued our Safer Streets for All. That's been a partnership with our county and Kansas Builds. And then we also have Kansas KDOT High Risk Urban Road, which is actually for supplies versus just a dollar donation. So always kind of thinking outside the box. And then we did a really neat Inflation Reduction Act community forest grant with our Parks Department to replace aging trees all throughout town. So big things happening here as well.
Those huge lists that you folks produce are really helpful to communicate to the community and people all the way from Walmart to the community foundation that you're being assertive and aggressive to look for these funds. So I think they serve multiple uses besides money.
As I mentioned when I introduced myself, I work on behalf of the Kansas Infrastructure Hub. So we are a multi-agency organization. We have 8 different state agencies that comprise our steering committee. We work in the sectors of water, energy, transportation, broadband, and cybersecurity. You'll also see on the screen that we do resilience, and some of you may be asking yourselves, what does resilience mean? And that is a little bit of sort of a carryover. If you can't, if you have an infrastructure related grant that you want to go for, but it doesn't necessarily fall within the sectors that I mentioned, resilience is the area where it can go. So where we have seen in the past is there is a grant that's called Building Resilient Communities, and that falls under the resilience sector. So we have a couple of different areas that we provide assistance in. One is we have what most people know or are most familiar with, which is our Build Kansas Fund. We have a total, the Kansas legislature has appropriated $150 million for local grant matches. So when communities are applying for infrastructure grants, which tend to be quite sizable, oftentimes there is a match requirement. So if we just take an example, a simple example, I think if you apply for an infrastructure grant under the IIJA, which is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and that's where all of our grants are linked to for the Build Kansas Fund. If you're applying for a grant that's $1 million and it's an 80-20 match, meaning that 80% is funded by the federal government, but communities are responsible for that 20%. Oftentimes we work with cities that are under 5,000, under 1,000, and trying to meet that 20% match, which would equate to $200,000, is just out of reach for a lot of communities across our state. So that's where we come in. Communities can apply for that match grant contribution. They do so by submitting an application. We have a 2-tiered process. First, it has to go through our steering committee, which is made up of our state agencies. After it is approved by the steering committee, then we take it to the legislative advisory committee. Once it is approved there, then you will receive a letter indicating that you have been approved for these funds. The caveat is that you have to also receive your federal award notification. If you do not receive a federal award notification, unfortunately, then we can't honor that Build Kansas Fund match because the two are linked together. So when we ask people across the state what is the greatest resource that the Kansas Infrastructure Hub provides, the most commonly answered response is money, and that makes a lot of sense. But we also offer technical assistance, and this is like a close second in terms of when we ask people like what is your satisfaction with the Kansas Hub? What do you appreciate about it? It's the money first, and then it's the technical assistance. We have a team of 8 different individuals who cover 8 different economic development districts across the state, who are available to walk communities through the entire grant process. Oftentimes that starts simply with a phone call. We have an identified problem we're trying to solve for. Can you help us in solving that problem? So sometimes those concerns can be through a state agency grant, and maybe that's the most appropriate response. Other times it's through federal grants. So these individuals help literally from like identifying and stating the problem statement to the actual grant implementation. Now, we are not grant writers. We do not write the grants. We know that there are loads of very well qualified individuals across the state, and that is their primary job. And we're not trying to take away from that at all. What we're trying to do is we want to be additive. We want to be an additional resource for you. That is the second. The third is I'm kind of working my way from right to left, which is the grant assistance program. Say you're a community, unlike Rebekah's experience where she mentioned having a really phenomenal grant writer, that isn't everyone's case, and we completely understand that. We have a program where if you need a grant writer and you do not have, the community does not have the resources to pay for it, we can assist with that as well. Sometimes we kind of link it to or think about it in terms of like a scholarship opportunity. So you know that you have someone that you would like to assist in writing your grant. You apply for, you send in an application, and again, it goes through our committees, and if it's approved, then we can pay for the funding of that grant writer. If you do not have an identified grant writer, that is totally fine as well. We have a list on our website, and I'll ask Jason or Jessica to go ahead and pull that link and put it into the chat as well, where we have grant writers, individuals who write grants for a living. It's not us to determine who you work with. That is absolutely within your discretion. But we do have identified grant writers who have said this is the kind of work that we do, and we're happy for people and individuals across the state to reach out to us.
Fantastic. One of the first messages is this is not about, I need money, I'm going to go get money. What you should be chasing is the outcomes, because that's what folks want to fund. Your funders want to help you attain those outcomes. And so your biggest challenge is to develop a good plan. Thinking about what is the problem or the opportunity that you see here, what change is possible. What will we do and how will we measure success? In grant writing terms, those are other words for problem, outcome, activity, and evaluation.
And so along with chasing those outcomes, your communities or the communities that you work for or live in or consult with or assist, identifying those community priorities is top of the food chain in terms of being successful in pursuing grants. When I came here, when I returned back to the city of Osawatomie, my predecessor had sat down with the community, the city council. They had several listening sessions and then some goal setting, and they identified 5 goals that the community wanted to see the city work on. Those were enhancements to the hard infrastructure, the soft infrastructure, improving streets, repairing, replacing streets, economic development, including housing, and then also cleaning up the community. You can find grants out there to help with each one of those 5 goals. And my guess is if your community sets a different set of 5 goals, there are also grants out there to help with those goals, whatever they may be. Something new that we are working on right now that's been kind of bubbling up on social media for the last couple of years is we've got a railroad that intersects our community. About 50% of the way through the community is divided by the railroad tracks. Um, there's an overpass in the community, but it's not for bicycles or pedestrians. So when trains are blocking all 3 of the intersections, the pedestrians, the bicyclists, they struggle. They can't get across the tracks because the trains are in the way. We've had anecdotal evidence of kids crossing between railroad cars, crawling underneath railroad cars, dragging bicycles underneath railroad cars to get to the other side of the tracks so they can go to school. We've had multiple meetings with the Union Pacific Railroad, and we're getting some traction. We also had a meeting with the technical assistance folks at the Kansas Infrastructure Hub that Shawn was just mentioning, and that was a very productive meeting with that group. And then we've got another follow-up meeting with them here in February. But the biggest thing you've got to take away from this whole conversation is identifying what those priorities are, and that starts with identifying individuals in your community and setting those goals.
Perfect. And if you don't have the skills, if you're not confident in your facilitation skills to come have a productive meeting, we have a very burgeoning team that's emerging. And it's not just for extension agents, but largely that's who's on it right now. And they can come help. You know, your goal is to, as Bret said, have these listening sessions for any reason. They can help you design an effective session. And if you want training in that, we can help you with that too. And you can be one of those trained facilitators. We have a really great website. I hope some of you have used it. All Things Kansas. And it's just many, many layers, 30,000 data layers from 120 national and state sources that will help you map and visualize data, build geography-based reports, understand communities and market demands, and analyze workforce strengths and industry gaps. It will help you make data-informed decisions. And I had to be reminded by going to a Missouri conference, a community there, Excelsior Springs, talked about how helpful KSU TAB, that's technical assistance to brownfields, had been to both their community meetings and setting priorities, and then looking at buildings that look scary to a potential investor who may not know what they will find once they try to redevelop it, but it's a free EPA program that will help you take an underutilized property and give it value. And Bret tells me that ICMA has a similar project. These are some of the things that KSU TAB can help you do. We're working currently or KSU TAB is working with Osage City, and City Manager Katie Hodge writes, as our partnership with KSU TAB begins, we look forward to receiving guidance and support to navigate the brownfield assessment and redevelopment process. We anticipate that their technical assistance will provide clarity on the regulatory requirements, the funding opportunities, and the best practices for site reuse. We value their role in strengthening our local capacity. Again, local capacity is what we're here to help with.
And both Nancy and Brett have really hit on the grant process is really a partnership. One person, even though I gave all of the credit to our city clerk, she isn't doing it alone, and she's the first to say that. And she might be able to wordsmith our apps really well, but she needs the data from the right people. And so we're a few years into this, obviously, with her, but we took a new approach this year, and we actually created a grant like application calendar, or we're in the process of finalizing it so that we know kind of what grant is on deck, so we can backtrack data collection, making sure we have the studies that we need if they're required, that we have the match if necessary. All of the pieces to the puzzle that is the grant application and the grant success are there. And so part of that is who you partner with in the beginning, right? She uses this example a lot with our electric utility. She's not an electrician. She doesn't know all the stats and figures and what the acronyms mean. So she needs the expert in that field to explain it to her. And all the departments working together with the calendar, the approach there internally is that we know what the priority is as an organization. And so if there's a reoccurring grant that could fit a couple different project options, that we know which project is actually on deck first. Like this is the one that needs to first, and the other one might have to wait till next year or 2 years. Other things is looking externally. So Bret talked a lot about understanding for like us as municipalities, our citizens and what their goals are, what they want. But also in our Safer Roads for All grant that we applied for, we partnered with our county to do a Franklin County-wide look at what roads needed help. And so then we, instead of going against each other, put them all together in a packet and was like, hey, this much money could help with all of these things that help all of these people. And so that's a collaboration that granting agencies really enjoy.
When we talk about grants and when we talk about partnering with others on grants, I really just can't emphasize enough how important this is. I mean, Rebekah gave some really good examples, but I'd like to also just share the perspective from someone who has worked on federal grants. And previous to this position, I worked for the federal government for almost 20 years. And one of the things that they consider one of the things that when grant reviewers are, what they are looking for, and they consider a very high priority, is how are you partnering with communities close to you? So as I mentioned, we work very closely, and our whole program is built upon finding grants within this larger federal IIJA bill. This is a multi-jurisdiction, these are multi-jurisdiction grants. When a community is able to say and identify what their specific needs are, and if those needs also correspond and align with communities in surrounding areas, we highly, highly encourage you to work together to submit one larger grant proposal. The reason why is because it shows partnership, it shows collaboration. It's actually a cost-saving mechanism on behalf of the federal government. It shows alignment in values and needs, and it for you as individuals and within your communities, it also ensures that you're not competing with your neighbors for the same pot of money. And there's just honestly so much good that can come of collaborating with communities within a specific geographic scope. And it's looked very, very favorably upon at the reviewers who sit in DC.
So one of the things that as you're looking at projects and you've heard from your community, your residents, people can come up with all kinds of, I'll call them wild, crazy ideas to bring to a community. But evaluating whether or not something is reasonable is one thing. Is it appropriate? Is it fair? Is it logical? Communities go through needs assessments on a regular basis, and you can identify a lot of different projects that would be nice to have. They might seem reasonable, but at the end of the day, are they technically feasible? Financially, are they feasible? Can you get them done within the time frame that the grant allows for them to be done within? To tie back to our water treatment plant, it took us almost 2 years to get our letter of conditions from rural development. They gave us 5 years to complete not only an approximately $30 million water treatment plant, but also almost $18 million in distribution improvements to the distribution mains within our community. Those are reasonable goals to have in mind, and they are, thanks to the grant, they're also feasible. If it weren't for the grant, that project would not be feasible, and we'd be having a completely different conversation, not only with our community and our residents and our customers to our water utility, but we would also be having conversations with other providers that we could possibly buy water from. It wasn't reasonable when we looked at the cost to tie into another water utility. It was not reasonable for us to do that because the cost exceeded what the existing costs are now for us to continue to produce our own water. So those are the types of considerations that you have to be thinking about constantly as you're applying, and as you're applying for grants and considering projects. Always be revisiting, the information, the data that informs whatever project you're going after, because as more information comes in, that could change whether a project becomes reasonable, becomes unreasonable, or becomes infeasible.
So I kind of hit on this a little bit earlier when I talked about having the right people in the room. And this this graph here is from our capital improvement plan for the city of Ottawa. And so I grabbed it because it very clearly shows how we kind of had to layer things to get a specific project done at our airport. And the quality of thought that you put into your budget prep, this was definitely geared when we were talking to municipal finance individuals about prepping for your budget. But it rings true to anyone applying for a budget, a grant, that if you need to have match, you need to be able to prove and show that you are financially set up to succeed as well. And I'm not just saying that because I work in finance. It is a very important part of having the right people in the group, in your team.
Yeah, I'm also happy to add, this is gonna sound really intuitive, but honestly, we can't stress it enough. Follow the directions. If whatever is asked of you in that grant, make sure that you are regurgitating that information into your proposal. Ensure that you are answering absolutely every single question. It also, oftentimes, something that is helpful are visual representations, particularly if you're applying for any type of infrastructure grant. Let's just take, for example, you're applying for a grant to help rebuild a road. It is one thing to narrate through writing the condition of the road. It is quite another to show a visual of what that road may look like. And that's really important, I think, as well. And it's something that I think sometimes people overlook. They think, oh, if I write to the problems, that is enough. But any additional sources that you can use to really present your case, I would encourage you to do so. With regards to the match dollar request that Rebekah was referring to, also very, very important. So for example, what the guidance that we give to individuals who are applying for an IIJA grant and also applying to the Build Kansas Fund is submit your application to the Build Kansas Fund at the same time as that you're applying for that federal grant. If you are able to get that approval simultaneously, so that when you actually hit the send button for that federal grant to say that we have secured that 20% match funding, that is going to help you and your community in innumerable ways.
So I had mentioned at the beginning, we utilize a grant administrator for a lot of our federal grants, USDA, CDBG, those types of grants are, have Davis-Bacon wage requirements and have other reporting requirements that, at least for the city of Osawatomie, we do not have the staff to manage all of that. So we employ the services of a grant administrator. But on some of these other grants that it's a HEAL grant or a base grant with the Kansas Department of Commerce, which the city of Osawatomie received here a couple of years ago. Those reporting requirements are a little bit more manageable for staff to undertake themselves. As an example, I've got Submittable pulled up right now, working on my wrap-up report to Whit O'Brien, to close that grant out. But those things all have to be taken into consideration when you're applying for a grant, to understand that yes, there is going to be some hours required of you or a contractor or a consultant to help maintain and manage those reporting requirements. One of the things that Shawn touched on, and I had remembered that I had mentioned it at our government finance officers conference when we did this presentation the last time. If at first you don't succeed, apply again. We have the city of Osawatomie applied for a Kansas Housing Resources Corporation and a moderate income housing grant 4, maybe 5 times. I think Jason might remember the number of times Osawatomie applied, and we were not successful on every one of those times, except the last time we applied, we changed our approach. We went back to the grant application, the reporting the requirements of the grant, what the granting agency was looking for, and we kind of retooled the approach. We went out, we solicited an RFP, proposals for the land that we were looking to develop, found a developer, and completely attacked that grant application in a different manner, and were successful. And it was awarded to us back in November, I believe, and that project is now underway, and they've broken ground on the houses. So, don't get discouraged. If you've gotten a rejection letter in the past, take advantage. If the granting agency offers some time to sit down and do a debrief with your grant application, take advantage of that. The agencies are making that available to you, and it's for your benefit. So it can help you make your grant application just that much stronger the next time you apply.
And I'll just emphasize that last point that Bret made, because a lot of people don't know that they are eligible to receive feedback on their application. So you may try that first, second time and not be successful. And that can feel really discouraging, particularly if you invested a lot of time and emotional energy into understanding. Grants are complicated. I mean, particularly at the federal level. But you are entitled to know the reason why it was not approved. And it may be for something that is it could be a very simple answer and something that you overlooked, and it's just a small tweak that has to be made. I also wanted to say as well that, particularly with the federal grants, it is not a human who's going through that first round. So when I say be very specific, look at the language, regurgitate that language back to them. That is because you oftentimes have AI generated different, computer generated programs that are doing that first round of to ensure that all of the information that was required of you is in there. So look at the language that is used within the grant and use that same language when you're writing towards your application. And that's a helpful, I hope that will be a helpful, useful hint and tool for you all moving forward.
Yeah, those are excellent points. And that's one thing our clerk does. She always follows up and gets that feedback so that she knows how to improve. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about layering grants here. Um, so I first off want to explain that sometimes when you're looking at a project, your scope is going to change, at least at the municipality level. So this example here is our for our airport. It's that same project that I showed you the little snippet of the budget from the capital improvement plan. Um, you got to be ready to roll with the punches a little bit with project management, is what I've learned in the last 5 years. This started out as a rehabilitation and then it switched to a reconstruction, and those are two very different words. The scope of the project changed dramatically, and so how we were going to pay for the original activity really had to switch. And so we had to look at maybe phasing the project, and we ended up not having to phase it because we ended up securing a larger federal grant to match with our local airport grant, and then local match was available just because we had done some foreshadowing and forethinking and had the budget to do that. But that sort of layering was a very creative solution to this problem that seemed very insurmountable when we discovered at the very start of the project that it was actually much more in depth and much larger than we had planned. Um, so this scenario worked out well for us, but it's not always going to work out. But when you can layer grants together, that's always a great opportunity and something you should watch out for and look for, especially when your project budget, triples from what you thought it was going to start as.
So, K-State, besides the grant writing basics class that Jason referred to, and that's the one that I teach, we'll be offering an online version again in February. It's getting put online right now, but just contact me and I'll get you set up with that. It costs $60 for 6 hours, and if you do the homework to prove that you learned what you learned, why my credential is offered. We also have a professional grant development and management class. That's 8 weeks and it's all online. Oh, we also do teach grant writing basics in person. We'll be going to Columbus and to Newton, and basically we respond to communities who ask us to do that in the community. And we partner with the Kansas Hub and with the Commerce folks because we want you to see these people in person and realize that they're really there to help you and make you successful. We have lists of contract grant writers, and we also don't write grants for you, but we'll do grant searches and we'll read your grants and give you feedback. Um, the reason these folks are here is because I don't write infrastructure grants. I don't know anything about them. So my feedback would not be very appropriate to you. So find somebody who's done that kind of grant is the answer to that question. I just completed my last First Friday call, but these calls will be going on from now on. Our Director of Economic Development is going to take these on, and they're a good resource to cities and so forth. You can see the recordings from all the sessions for the last 9.5 years online. But our purpose is to connect in the same way that the Kansas Hub is doing today, to connect the experts, the education, and the economic resources to those small businesses and the communities who love them. So there's just lots of stuff going on in Kansas to support economic development, and we want to help put them with the people who need to know that. We have a program called Remote Work, and you can get, if you have employees who need that training to be better, or even in 2020 when we all went online, in 2021 we started this remote work training, and our supervisors said, wow, I wish I'd had this before 2020 hit, because it gives you some really concrete ways to supervise remote workers. But Remote Work Wednesday is just topical issues. In this particular, the next one on January 14th is going to be advice from inside an agency. My experience working in office and remotely. And a fun little thing that's happening, we're now having our second Connecting Entrepreneurial Communities offering. It's going to be in tiny Cortland, Kansas, in Republic County, population less than 300. Our first conference was in Kingman in June of 2025. And after that Kingman conference, we had such amazing outcomes. A local business owner sold a building to a conference participant within the next 24 hours. A local downtown shop reported its best sales day in its history. We build in shopping time. Our point is to bring economic development and to learn from each other. One conference participant returned to Kingman and is now considering relocating there to start a new business. The Kansas Micro Internship Program, which is a Kansas Board of Regents program that will help connect college students, all college students, not just K-Staters, but all Kansas college students with remote jobs in your communities. And they reported that they connected several conference participants and local business owners with student interns to help with projects. And 6 months later, a participant received a $50,000 grant from the follow-up technical assistance they'd gotten from our presenter, Jenny Doty, a Kansas Food Systems Resource Navigator. So if you can, if it's appropriate to you and helpful to you, I hope you'll consider joining us in Cortland in June. And that concludes our presentation. And we have time if there are questions. And otherwise, you have our contact information at the end of the slides.
Just give it a few more seconds. If anyone's typing up a question or comment in the chat box, please put it there. While we're waiting, I will just put, we don't have a slide for this, but I'll put a link in the chat. The Kansas Infrastructure Hub is pleased to announce, and we released in December our new finance guide and technical assistance guide. And these both provide a great deal of resources in terms of grant opportunities and other technical assistance providers around the state in areas outside of just infrastructure. I do see we have a question. Nancy, Curtis Mullins would like to chat with you sometime about the general grant writing classes as well. And he has some more specific questions about the potential grants with the bag that he'd like to talk about. Oh, I'm sorry. And he just sent that to the hosts and panelists. And that is just a question for you. So we might get you connected afterwards. Curtis, if you want to put your contact information in the chat to the hosts and panelists, we'll make sure Nancy sees that.
Great. And I am unfamiliar with BEG. Is somebody on our panel aware of that? Oh, okay. Maybe it's big, audacious grants.
Fiber internet.
Fiber internet. Got it.
Okay. All right.
Well, great. Well, do you want to thank our panelists, Bret and Rebekah? Thank you for taking time out of your busy days running your cities. It occurred to me after we started, Osawatomie and Ottawa are both on the Flint Hills Nature Trail, a wonderful resource we have here in Kansas, one of the longest rail trails in the country. So if you ever get a chance to go visit Ottawa and Osawatomie, great communities in the state. And then, of course,
Osawatomie.
You can start at Osawatomie, but you have to stop at Ottawa. But we have two trails here.
Great. Well, thank you both.
It's a beautiful trail. I ride it all the time.
And then also wanted to thank Nancy personally. She's been a great friend and colleague over 20 years. I've happened to know her, and she alluded to it a little bit in her remarks, but she is retiring in July, and she's had an incredible success traveling the state and doing those grant workshops and offering them online. So you've been a great partner to the Infrastructure Hub, and we thank you for that. And with that, we'll just thank the audience for attending today and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank